Hello, welcome to the Politics Chicks podcast. I'm Monica Healy.
And I'm Christy Branham.
Today we're joined by Naomi Richman, a Minnesota-based organizer, healthcare advocate, and the founder of Moms for Ethical AI, a growing movement pushing back on the unchecked expansion of AI technologies in children's lives. Naomi has spent her career asking tough questions about the systems that shape childhood, from healthcare to technology, and she brings a really unique perspective to this work. She's the daughter of software testing pioneer David Gilperin, who built his career on the idea that technology must be proven safe before it reaches the public. And Naomi has taken that philosophy and applied it to the biggest technological shift of our lifetime, artificial intelligence.
Naomi is also a student of Chinese philosophy and has edited works on the I Ching, the ancient binary system actually seeded in the digital age. And what really pushed Naomi into action was the death of a teenager named Adam Rain, whose suicide was linked to interactions with an AI chatbot. That tragedy led Naomi to found Moms for Ethical AI and launch a campaign encouraging parents and consumers to rethink how they engage with AI tools, including a push to cancel ChatGPT subscriptions and move towards safer alternatives like Claude. And if Naomi's name sounds familiar to Minnesotans, it may be because she was recently quoted in a New York Times article during the tension here in Minnesota during the recent ICE operations. Welcome to the show, Naomi.
Thank you for
Welcome.
having me.
Let's start with the moment that really changed your trajectory. You've been working around children and the systems that affect them for a long time, healthcare, policy, advocacy. But the death of Adam Rain seems to have been the catalyst that pushed you into AI activism. Can you tell us about that moment and what you realized about the risks of AI interacting with vulnerable young people?
Yeah. So my dad, at the end of his life, was trying to sound the alarm on the dangers of the lack of safety mechanisms that went into the software of self-driving cars, so autonomous vehicles, which are operating on AI. And I was sitting at my desk and I had read an article about Adam, and my dad had passed away 4 years prior. And I just felt him saying, like, you need to do this now because he's not around to do it anymore. So it really triggered something in me because the description of Adam's parents of him, he was 16 and he was just a typical kid who was using ChatGPT for homework help. And within a few months, he had hung himself in his room. And if you learn about the story, he was really groomed to do it by the chatbot. And it's a technology that people just have very little awareness of the mechanisms. They have little awareness of the dangers. A lot of people talk about the environmental impacts, which is definitely, important with the building of the data centers. But there are also a lot of psychological and mental and developmental impacts that AI is going to be having on our children, especially since it is already being pushed into schools by, the bigger tech companies. California has signed a deal with ChatGPT to put it into all the universities. And it's in a lot of different educational platforms already. So it just needs to be understood, and kids need to understand what they're talking to when they're talking to a chatbot because it does seem so real.
Sorry, I'm going to interject there because I want to say that the Secretary of the Department of Education also needs to understand AI, which she refers to as A1. So there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah. A1.
Good
Thanks,
on your
Linda.
steaks.
Yeah. A lot of parents probably don't realize how deeply AI tools are already embedded in their kids' lives. What are you seeing right now that concerns you the most? Is it emotional reliance on chatbots? Is it mental health conversations with AI? The lack of safety testing? The lack of the fact that companies are essentially experimenting on users in real time? My guess is all of the above.
Yeah, that's yes. It's complex, it's moving fast, it's being integrated into many different areas. And what people have been using chatbots for the most is mental health, even though they're not a licensed therapist, right? And it's So that's very concerning, especially for teenagers, because the times when you draw away from your parents and into a conversation is when you're already feeling disassociated from them, right? You're having a hard time. You have a lot of questions. Your parents don't understand you. And when you go to talk to a chatbot rather than talking to a human, you're kind of building a moat around yourself because there's nobody on the other side. There's nobody on the other end. It doesn't care about you. It's not thinking about you. It's not thinking. And so for teenagers and younger kids, my concern is mostly from like 10 to 11 up when kids are beginning to develop their autonomy away from their parents to have some sort of sycophantic um, conversationalist who is, telling you everything you want to hear, who's always encouraging your perspective, who's not really going to push back. And when kids are using this primarily for therapy, it's such a dangerous situation that I think that it needs to be unmasked for the kids. It needs to be unmasked for the parents. And I think big tech needs to put up guardrails before it's already too late to have it guardrails up before it's rolled out, but certainly they could do something to make it safer.
Yeah, and that sounds scary to me because you think about kids who experiment with drugs, they're self-medicating, right? So it's almost the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's both, right? And what we've seen, kids can be told that, they should be thinner and that can affect their physical health. Kids can be told that, like, because of the sycophantic nature of the chatbots, anything the kid puts out, they're told back like, hey, that's a great idea. And so it's reinforcing these beliefs that children are already struggling with because of social media, because of their use of smartphones. They're already struggling with their identity apart from, their friends, which is what social media kind of did to them. And now we're just giving them something that's not, it's not a thing. There's no there behind these chatbots. It's just language. But kids don't understand that. I always say, like, 10 and 11-year-olds are like 2 to 3 years from believing in Santa Claus. And we're handing them, these things that seem human if you're talking to it, right? I mean, I find myself like, I kind of miss Claude, but it's not a thing, but it's, it's something that you've incorporated into your life and it's giving you positive feedback and you're, developing your sense of self in relationship to this language model.
Yeah.
There are so many things that, people have said arguing against the use of AI, that there's no substitute for the human piece of it. And as an educator, I have to say that that's a huge piece of it. There's no substitute for that human interaction, and especially developmentally with children. You can't get that from the chatbot. You've articulated that very well.
Yeah.
I think there are places that the chatbot can be helpful in education if they're geared in that direction.
Sure.
But the generalized LLMs, no.
Well, and a lot of these kids, is it the fifth graders now that we're dealing with COVID as kindergartners? Like, a lot of these kids have never had, especially, in Minneapolis, where a lot of the kids moved to distance learning again because of safety issues at school. A lot of these kids, their early childhood education was, online. It was not in person. So they've already had that disconnect in the beginning. And so, their teachers and have been working for years to try to create those connections. And it sounds to me like AI just kind of breaks that down again because it's comfortable for them, because they're used to having a digital interface that they interact with the world around them through.
Yeah, certainly our reliance on screens and our time spent on screens have given, the newer generation a different perspective on acceptable interactions and interpersonal relationships. And, it's okay to talk to something that's on a screen because, there's also people on a screen. And so it blurs the line between, human interaction and computer interaction, which is what the chatbots are.
Yeah.
Christy mentioned how Minneapolis and other districts around the Twin Cities have gone to distance learning. And that ties into the fact that we are all Minnesotans. And we have seen another use of AI with the federal agents that are in our state and in our cities right now, and the surveillance that is being used. And Naomi, you have used a phrase that stands out. Surveillance capitalism isn't a side effect of big tech, it's the business model. For people who may not be familiar with that concept, can you explain what that means in practical terms? And how does data harvesting and behavioral prediction actually work? And why does it pose a particular risk when children are involved?
So I stole surveillance capitalism. That's not my word. Shoshana Zuboff wrote a book that came out, I believe, about 6 years ago, where she traces what she calls the capture of behavioral surplus. So she's talking about how Google initially started out to be just a search engine, but then when the dot-com bubble burst and they needed to all of a sudden make money, they realized that they had something that they could monetize in the behavior that they had captured from our responses to the search engines. And that's what Shoshana calls behavioral surplus. So it's a surplus because there's a certain amount of interaction that can be reused by companies in order to enhance our experience. So they improve the tech, and that's just the behavioral capture. But when there's additional behavioral data that they've taken, that's what she calls behavioral surplus, and that is being used. They sell that. So they're basically selling our behavior to ad agencies and data analysis agencies and things like that so that they can make money. And it started with Google. So Google had done that for a long time, and then Facebook took it and really just blew it up with all the like buttons and the
algorithm.
the algorithm, well, their algorithm, but also just how we reacted to it and the type of data that they captured, right? We were telling Facebook everything. We were giving them our pictures. We were telling them about our kids. We were telling them, all these different things and Instagram and all of that stuff. And so they really have a lot more information about us. And then you get to like ChatGPT, and that's kind of the end point, right? Now we're telling it not only what we want, but why we want it, why we think we should have it, how that compares to other things. And it's just, you would have to trust the tech companies to not take that kind of data and do something with it. And I mean, at least OpenAI, Sam Altman have proven that they cannot be trusted. But in terms of the Minneapolis component to that is that on January 22nd, it was 2 weeks after they killed Renee and 2 days before they shot Alex. OpenAI had partnered with Leidos, who's a government contractor whose tech is used in the surveillance of us now, right? I mean, it was fine when it was being used in a appropriate way, but now it's being turned on U.S. citizens. And so that was initially why I had called for a boycott of ChatGPT, but it's happening now. So.
Well, and I'm about to ask you about that, but this just reminds me of an article that I read on Pegasus. I don't know if you're familiar with Pegasus, but it's a surveillance program that's been used in Europe against European citizens. I believe that the Chinese government uses it, Russia uses it, to surveil citizens in real time, and they can pinpoint where you are within 3 minutes.
Well, they know where your cell phone is. So yeah.
So that leads right into
it's here.
One of the things yeah, and that leads right into the next question, which is one of the things you're advocating for is encouraging people to cancel ChatGPT subscriptions and move to alternatives like Claude, which is a pretty bold position. Given how widely ChatGPT is used, I think it's just become part of the lexicon and people have come to rely on it. But why are you asking people to take that step? And I think it's really important for people to hear this answer because it's terrifying.
So I mean, yeah, the initially it was because of what I just said about their partnership with Lados. Um, I had learned about it. It was they shot Alex on a Friday, I think. Saturday. Okay, so it's Saturday. So Saturday evening, I was like sitting at my computer. I'm like, there has to be something more we can do. Let's look at the businesses because the only thing these people care about is money. So let's figure out who we can go after so that we can start doing something. And I came across this article about OpenAI's partnership with Lados, and there was only one news organization, it was Gizmodo, who had reported on it because OpenAI had not said anything. Um, and Lados had announced the partnership in a press release, and Gizmodo had picked it up, and that was the only place it was on the net. And I was like, coming from Minneapolis and in the wake of the tragedy, and I was just like, this is not okay. Like, they can't. I had also read Karen Howe's book, Empire of AI, where she really goes through the entire. She goes through the history of OpenAI and Sam Altman, and the board had tried to fire him, had fired him. Like, the opening story of the book is the board firing him for being dishonest. And then you just kind of see his behavior as he's getting more and more power. And originally the company was supposed to be a nonprofit, and then that went by the wayside. And originally they were going to not have military applications, and that went by the wayside. And just his behavior in leading the company has been unethical. And so once I learned about the partnership with Lados, I was like, people shouldn't be using this app. There are options, right? There are other alternatives. And I also felt like if we wanted to send a message to the Trump administration, AI companies are all circularly invested, and the AI bubble is really like stabilizing the stock market.
Yeah.
And so I felt like this was a good thread to pull to get some attention if the market started to wobble a bit. Now, since, that
Which they
original
did
day.
today. They're down 1,000
Well,
points
it's a little hard to
today.
tell just because we're also in a war. So,
Yep. Yeah.
there's not a single factor right now, but
Yeah.
and Alt National Park Service had called for the boycott because Altman basically outed himself with his behavior with the DoD, and so everybody got to see what I had been saying initially anyway. And Greg Brockman, who's the president of OpenAI, had also donated something like $25 million. It was like the largest donation to the Trump organization, or to Trump's something.
And they
it was
all had
MAGA
front row
something.
seats at the inauguration too.
Right. Well, they all did that. But yeah, so they're not people who can be trusted with your information. They also added advertising, which they said they wouldn't do because they're so far out over their skis financially. So I just felt like this was like a really good string to pull. But now it's being pulled. I saw Alt National Park Service said that there was something like 4 million cancellations in a week.
Today.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how they know that, but they seem to know everything before it happens.
They do.
They have a lot of insider information.
I hope that the people behind Alt National Park write a book when this is all said and done.
I was just gonna say
because
the
I
same
want to know
thing.
who they are. It's like
So
they're the
fascinating.
superheroes, right?
Yeah.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And don't you really want to know what some of their cryptic messages sometimes stand for? Like when they just
Yeah, like
post
those
It's
numbers.
fascinating
numbers.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Naomi, you mentioned the fact that we've all kind of seen Sam Altman and why he can't be trusted, and why ChatGPT, and the fact that we're in a war. For listeners that might not be more cued into that, you want to say more about that, about how it ties in with the war that we're currently in?
Oh, well. Yeah. So using artificial intelligence in military applications is not new. They've been doing it for many, many years. What is new is that the large language models are being used, and it's actually not Altman, it's Claude. Anthropic's model is being used within Palantir and has been for a long time. And again, like, if you think about, okay, we're going to go attack our enemies, it might be helpful to have that type of system But it depends on how it's being used, and the chances of abuse are so much larger, and the level of destruction that it can cause. They fired something like 900 missiles in the first 12 hours, which was double the amount they were capable of without using the AI software. So the other thing that's to note about, using an LLM is that the LLMs are only as good as their training data, and these LLMs have trained on the internet. So they've trained on Reddit, and they've trained on, everything that they've read, which is maybe true and maybe not true. And, you know, the big word is hallucinations with these. But there are a lot of other problems with using this type of model for warfighting when there's no way a human could actually keep up with what they're trying to do. So if there's a human there, they're just kind of clearing the queue. They're not actually like sitting and thinking with it and thinking like, is this a good idea? Maybe it's a girls' school and not a military base. Maybe we shouldn't fire that rocket. Things of that nature
Right.
that humans could, intervene at the pace at which, machines can do it. Humans can't keep up. And that's the point, right?
Yeah.
It's
But machines
the
also
speed
don't
of
have
machines.
discernment either. They're not
No, they
capable
don't
of
have judgment,
discernment.
and they don't know if what they're seeing is true. They're not
Yeah.
they're not thinking. They don't think. They predict. That's what they are. They're predictive models. So, I think if you guys are interested, I'd like to just explain a little bit about how they actually work, so it's like demystify
We
it
would
a
love
little
that.
bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would love
So
that.
basically, they have trading data, and they're given all the data, and then they work with people who tell them whether or not what they're saying is valid. So there's two stages, but basically what it does is they take a word and they break it down, they give it a number, and then they place the number in what's called like a mathematical space. So if you imagine like a three-dimensional space, and each one of the words is a star, like in the galaxy, but they're placed in proximity to the words that they were found to be in proximity within the training data. Does that make sense? So you're
Yes.
going to see
So like
like
mind mapping, only on like a
cat
bigger
and
scale.
dog are going to be close together, whereas
Yeah.
cat and house are going to be farther apart, right? When you ask it a question, it reconfigures the numbers into words based on the probability that it constructed from the mapping. That's all it is. That's what it does. It's not thinking, it's not reasoning, it doesn't like use logic, it doesn't have emotions. It's just predicting patterns of conversation and language based on its training data and what it was told was correct by a human. So
Well, and
that's all it is.
And what most people don't understand is that the people who are in the arena actually, calling the shots for war go to an actual war college. It's called war college. And that's where
And
they learn,
therapists go to school to learn therapy, and writers, right? I
right?
mean, yes, all of those things, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pervasive into every place in our lives now. It's going to affect the environment, it's going to affect education, it's going to affect democracy, it's going to affect writers and artists, and it's going to affect war, and it's everywhere, even though what it really is just a language.
Yeah, and we
So,
just interviewed Trina Swanson the other day, and she was talking about the fact that Google wants to put a data center up, and she's in District 8, so it's all of northern Minnesota up to the Canadian border. And they kind of just pushed it. What did she say, Monica? They just kind of pushed it through and didn't tell people what it was
yeah.
about.
Yeah.
They just said it was something that
They're
was going to
paying off who
benefit
they
them.
need to pay off to make it
Yeah,
happen.
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's no getting that
So
stuff back. I mean, you ruin the environment and that's it.
yeah,
You
Right.
know?
yeah, and the impact on water rights and the whole deal, and the impact it's going to have on the community. We still don't know how all the residue that is going back into the environment, how that's going to impact children and their development and the environment in general either. And that's just terrifying.
Technology
So
is supposed to improve human life. There is no point in it if it doesn't do that. There's no reason to have a technology if it's not going to make our lives better. But these technologies that they're putting out right now, what they're doing is making people richer, and we have yet to see any kind of significant benefit for the costs that are already, happening to people's lives, to the environment, to the workers in South America who like have to sift through stuff. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Monica says all the time, follow the money. I mean, that's just follow where the money is going and
Right.
follow, that is the MO of it's the model, the new business model in this age where, everything is a commodity. They're monetizing anything that they can.
They're monetizing us is what they're
Yeah.
doing now. They've run out of, places on earth and trees and rivers
Yeah.
and lakes. And so we're the last commodity. And so they're monetizing us.
Yeah.
Naomi, you're clearly in the weeds of all the AI technology, but for people who aren't steeped in the world of AI tools like me, what makes Claude different? You mentioned that earlier. Is it the design philosophy, the safety guardrails, the corporate structure behind it? And what do you see there that gives you more confidence in going in that direction?
Um, I would say Claude is the lesser of two evils. I wouldn't say like quit GPT and everyone run. I mean, that's kind of what's happened because all National Park Service did tell everyone to quit GPT and run to Claude. So, but there are a lot of people who would say they're just as bad. But the Amadeus, Dario and Daniela, brother and sister, who run Anthropic, used to work for OpenAI, and they were the safety team. And they saw the direction that Alma was going, and they were like, "Nope," and they left and went and started Anthropic. So personally, I don't like GPT because when I type something, it just kind of like word vomits out like 2 pages and you're like, that wasn't really what I wanted or what I thought. When you're having a conversation with someone, it's a back and forth and it's like, okay. And then they may or may not understand what you mean. And they ask a clarifying question. And Claude does that from the get go. So when you say something to Claude, it's like, let me clarify what you're asking. And then it will give you 3 options or 2 options so that it knows what you're asking. And it clarifies it for you too, right? Which I find helpful. And then if it has more questions, it asks additional questions so that you really kind of hone in on exactly what you're asking. And then it will give you those responses, which I think it puts more of you into the communication. Whereas with other AI, with other chatbots that I'd use personally, I feel like once you ask it a question, you're no longer part of the conversation because
Yeah.
there's so much information and there's so much information that you hadn't intended. So, as far as the LLMs, I have preferred Claude to the other ones. I have not tried Mistral, which is a French one that's supposed to be like GPT, but I haven't tried that one yet.
Haven't even heard of that one.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that one either.
Yeah, it's from
I
France.
heard that there's one out of China too. I can't remember what the name of it
Oh, DeepSeek?
is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And interesting. Yeah, I don't want to get too in the weeds for that, but yeah,
Yeah.
I will say.
And well, speaking of getting into the weeds, you mentioned that Anthropic has a relationship with Palantir, and Palantir is Peter Thiel,
Not a good guy. Yes,
basically.
Palantir is
And
Peter Thiel. Yeah.
owns JD Vance. So
Yeah, it's troubling. I mean, I have had people who said to me, well, I'd rather have, Anthropic in there than one of the other ones, which I guess there's some silver lining to that because it does seem like the Amadeus are somewhat, more ethical than Altman is. I mean, definitely
explain
than
exactly what happened with the whole thing with
the DoD.
yeah. I mean, because it's kind of terrifying if you think about it.
So I don't know exactly how it started. I know that like last Thursday or Friday, it kind of came out into the mainstream media that Hegseth was demanding that Anthropic allow the use of Claude, their LLM, for mass surveillance of Americans and for autonomous weapons with no human in the loop. And Anthropic said, that goes against our user agreements. And then Hegseth and Trump called them woke. or something like that.
Of course they did.
Yeah, because they're mature. And then,
Because they have integrity. Anyone who has integrity is woke, as far as they're concerned.
right. Well,
Or
and anybody
or
who says
disagrees
no to
with
them,
them.
right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't like being told no because they're 12, or 6 or 4. So sorry, just going down.
That's okay. Digress all you need
The
to. We're good.
tantrums, yeah. So so then Hegseth threatened to basically blacklist Anthropic, and Anthropic said, well, we're still not going to. And then it came out that Altman had been talking to the DoD and was like, well, we'll do it because that's Sam Altman. And so, yeah, but I read today that Amadei is actually trying to talk to the DoD, to the Pentagon
Well, I want
again.
you to reiterate
so
those
I'm not
words
sure.
again about mass surveillance of American
Yes.
citizens.
Yeah.
We're not
I mean,
talking
that's
about,
what Lados was doing anyway, right? I don't know that they're not already doing that.
Yeah.
I'm just not
but we're
sure.
not talking about checking what you're buying, putting in your cart on Amazon. We're talking about
No.
them surveilling you,
Yeah.
looking at your bank transactions, your internet searches.
I mean, basically anything the
everything.
CIA or FBI could have looked into anyway,
Yes.
but a machine speed, right?
And everywhere, everyone all at once, like not targeted.
No, and they are already doing that. The ICE has been using a lot of tech that already allows for geolocating and face scanning and things of that nature. So they're already using it. I honestly don't know how much worse it would be, except that they could probably surveil. They would just be able to surveil a lot more people a lot faster.
Every time someone says, I don't know how much worse it could possibly be, it gets a lot worse. It gets worse
Yeah.
than we could possibly imagine. So that
Yeah.
scares me.
I'm just not sure like what the capacity is from a
Yeah.
practical standpoint. And also because these machines make a lot of mistakes,
Yeah.
right? And that's an issue. There was a case where an ICE agent had written a report to present to a judge and had used like GPT, and the
Yeah.
judge was like, "What is this?
What the
You
fuck
know?
is this?
Yeah, this stuff isn't true." So
Yeah, they're
well, and again,
underqualified.
people don't understand what the LLMs are. I mean,
Mhm.
even if you use it a lot, like I'm learning new things about it and about what it's capable of and how it works. And it's complicated tech. And so if people don't understand it, they don't know how to use it, and they'll believe what it says. And that's the bigger problem.
Well, in my workflow for this show, because I do a lot of the back end of it, what I do is I get when this is over and it's done recording, I'll get a written transcript from Riverside, our recording platform. And I take that is when I start using GPT or Claude. I'm going to try it with Claude now this next time, where I will take the transcript and put it in and say, I need show notes. This is the recording. And it will pull out the points for me. And it distills it down so that I can write the show notes without having to read through the entire transcript again. It pulls out. And I see that as beneficial for me.
100%.
It's a time saver.
Yep.
For me, it's, it's distilling information that I'm handing to it. And I see that as an ethical use of it because,
And you're an adult and you're fully formed as a human being and you know how to do that.
And I don't have time to read a transcript for a 45-minute show
Sure.
and go through and pull all that stuff out. So, but I can see where it's problematic in a lot of other uses. So, and a lot of parents listening to this might be thinking, I had no idea this was even happening. More than just parents, right? Everyone is probably going, oh my God, what is happening here? If someone is just waking up to this issue, what are some practical steps they can take right away to protect their kids and themselves in this new AI saturated world? I go back to Aldous Huxley quite a bit when I think about this whole thing and Brave New World. So what are some steps that you think people can take?
I think one of the most powerful things that people can do with their kids is explain to them exactly what they're talking to. I think the unmasking and understanding that it's not your friend, it's not your confidant, understanding that it is a language model. And I think older teenagers kind of get that. I've had conversations with 17 and 18-year-olds and they're like, Yeah, we know what it is, right? Because they've kind of grown up in the tech. My concern is more the 10, 11, 12, 13-year olds who are really just developing their autonomy. So I think sitting down and talking to them about it, because they can just download it onto their phones, right? They can get any of the apps. There's no reason they can't. So checking their phones, if you know they're having a hard time, you really want to just sit down and talk to them about it. There are some resources out there about how to talk. We didn't, at Moms for Ethical AI, I didn't put anything up on the site about that because there is a lot of that out there. So if people search for it, they can find Center for Humane Technologies has information.
And we're going to link your site
Yep.
in the show notes for this, so people know how to get a hold of.
And I can give
that
you other sites to
information.
link to and other sources for parents to go to
Perfect.
to how to talk to them about how to talk to your kids about it. And
Perfect.
I would suggest using it with them, figure it out with them. I know people are like, don't use it, it's a bottle of water. But I think that it's really important because they're going to have it in school. They're going to have to know how to use it. It's going to be in the workplace. And so I think just getting a good intro alongside your parents is a good way to go about it for kids.
It's kind of like electricity. There were people that just didn't want electricity in their homes because it was too much for them. Like that progress was just not something that they wanted to participate in. But
Or the
now we
written
all have
word,
electricity.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Well, progress for the sake of progress is one thing, but we are under the wrong leadership right now to introduce
Yes.
this hugely transformative technology with little to no oversight and regulation from the people at the top. So
Yeah.
that part is
Well,
scary.
and that's one of the reasons they were helping Trump, right? Because Biden was trying to regulate, and these guys are all like, oh, you can't regulate us, because then the Chinese will get in front of us and they're going to be the first ones to get to AGI or ASI, artificial general intelligence, which is not really
Well, and
even
he's trying to push
possible.
through in these omnibus bills. He's trying to push. There was legislation about states not being able to regulate AI for
Mhm.
either 5 or
Yeah,
10 years. I can't
because he's in their
remember.
pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which would be awful. I mean, awful thing.
Yes.
The shooting in Canada. That kid was talking to an LLM and to ChatGPT, and they didn't reveal it. They knew he was a problem. They had kicked him off the platform, and then they didn't tell anyone. So if they're gonna surveil,
They have to have accountability.
Use it for
What
good.
is the thing? Yeah. And what is it with everyone just like shirking their civic responsibility and their social responsibility and not taking accountability for things? We're getting that modeled at the highest levels of our government, and I think that's what's problematic.
100%. I really have no idea. I mean, that's not how I function
Yeah.
as a human. So
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense to me, except that, I guess these boys weren't loved as a child and they don't know how to be human. And I'm always thinking about the fact that we're on this, giant orb floating through space or flying through space at 76,000 miles an hour. And like, how do I want to spend my few years that I have here, right? It's not just
Right.
making money, because in the end, that's not what makes your life meaningful, but to them, money and power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So
Yeah.
they are being held. There is some accountability, though. There's something like 8 lawsuits coming out of California aimed at OpenAI for 2 suicides, I believe, and other mental health AI psychosis, people are calling it. And then Google's
Okay.
now being sued in Florida as of today. I think we learned about that for another suicide. There are people who marry their
God.
chatbots. I mean,
What?
I don't know.
What?
That's a thing?
Oh, so
That's
yeah,
crazy.
there's character AI and Nomi and Replica, and these are like character bots. And character AI was sued because they had also talked a boy into killing himself. And so now children aren't allowed to use those character. It's kind of like a blow up doll, but it's a chatbot.
Oh my
You can
God.
make them however you want, and people have married their chatbot. There was one story about a man who married his chatbot, and his wife was like, "Yeah, that's fine." I don't know.
It's like the South Park episode where he was so involved with the chatbot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
But
that is
there, yeah.
bonkers.
So
Yeah.
It is bonkers. And their protective measures, some of them are like, well, you have to be 18 to use our site, but it's you enter your birth date when you sign up, right? That's not at
Well,
all a
and male
protective measure.
brains a lot of times aren't fully developed until they're 25. So,
30, 35,
Yeah.
yeah,
Ever.
ever.
yeah, ever.
Sorry, male brains.
Right.
Most of y'all are great. Yes, no.
Naomi, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with us before we wrap things up?
So I started Moms for Ethical AI because I think that the only way to fight back against corporate interests are for parents to organize collectively, like Moms Demand Action, right, for gun rights lobbyists or for gun safety lobbyists. And I think that I know that there's so much going on in the world right now. And honestly, when I started this was kind of in the before times. So it's gotten a little bit harder to really be concerned about AI, but there's only a certain window for a lot of kids for developing their autonomy. And I think that, parents of children of a certain age, like middle schoolers, should really start paying attention to what's happening with artificial intelligence that's facing their kids. So,
Well, thank you so
mhm.
much. It's been a fascinating conversation. And what really strikes me about your work is that you're asking the kind of questions we probably should have been asking a lot earlier, about safety and accountability and who these technologies are really built for. And AI is moving incredibly fast, and parents deserve to understand how these systems are shaping their kids' lives and their own lives. And we appreciate you taking the time to talk us through this today. It was really a great conversation.
I
Can
think
I
a
say
big
one more thing?
yes,
Absolutely.
please.
Okay. So everyone's read The Anxious Generation, right?
Hmm.
News read The Anxious Generation. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, if people had known from the beginning the kind of damage that social media was going to be doing to their kids, they would have stopped it, right? And this is the
Yes.
moment that we're in for artificial intelligence and childhood development. Like, this is the moment where we could really turn it around so that the harm doesn't come.
I have to say,
That's
as a
important.
teacher, I very much appreciate that. I started teaching in 1994, and I cannot even express the difference of teaching in 1994 versus, 2024 when I retired. And the biggest factor in changing education, bar none, is screens. And
Yep.
I could go off on a tangent on how that has affected children and rewiring their brains, and they can't entertain themselves, and the short attention spans, and not only bad for children, but for parenting and educating as well. So they could go off on another tangent, but I think
Yeah.
the big takeaway here is that technology doesn't just happen to us. We still get to decide what kind of guardrails we expect around it. Conversations like this will help people understand that they actually have a voice in shaping the future of these tools. Naomi, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your perspective.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much for having me. It was really fun.
Listeners, if you're finding meaning in the stories we're sharing, if something moves you, challenges you, or makes you see the world a little differently, please like, comment, and share. It helps more than you know. It puts our work in front of more eyes and goes miles in helping us grow this amazing community.
And follow us everywhere at the Politics Chicks on Substack, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Thank you for being part of our community. Keep shining your light so we can find each other in the dark.
And remember, we're always stronger together. Thanks, Naomi.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
We'll see you soon.